Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
What if I told you that the Minnesota Vikings head coach, the reigning NFL Coach of the Year, has been running one of the absolute worst offensive schemes in professional football for an entire season? And what if I told you he only figured it out last week? Buckle up, because this story is about to blow your mind and might just explain why Vikings fans have been tearing their hair out watching this roller coaster of a season. The Minnesota Vikings just demolished the Washington Commanders 31-0 in what might have been their most dominant performance of the year. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. It only happened because Kevin O'Connell finally admitted he's been doing it all wrong. And I mean spectacularly, historically, embarrassingly wrong again, even though every single dish you serve gets sent back to the kitchen. You've got access to the finest ingredients money can buy. Your pantry is stocked with premium items. Your kitchen is state-of-the-art. But you stubbornly refuse to change that one terrible recipe. That's essentially what Kevin O'Connell has been doing with the Vikings offense all season long, and the numbers are absolutely staggering. Before groupings, because this is where things get really interesting. In the NFL, coaches use numerical codes to describe their offensive formations. 11 personnel means you have 3 wide receivers, 1 running back, and 1 tight end on the field. 12 personnel means 2 wide receivers, 1 running back, and 2 tight ends. 22 personnel brings 2 running backs and 2 tight ends. 21 personnel features 2 running backs and 1 tight end. And 13 personnel, which is going to become very important to this story, means 1 running back and 3 tight ends with just 1 wide receiver. Now here's where the story takes a turn from interesting to absolutely mind-blowing. The Vikings, before their Week 14 matchup against Washington, were running 11 personnel on over 70% of their offensive snaps. They were among the top 5 teams in the entire league in terms of how frequently they used this particular formation. You would naturally assume that if a team is using a specific personnel grouping that much, they must be pretty darn good at it, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Brace yourself for this statistic because it's genuinely hard to believe. When the Vikings ran 11 personnel this season, they ranked 333rd out of 334 possibles this season. The Vikings' most frequently used formation was literally the second worst in professional football. They had a negative 79 expected points added, which is a statistical measure of how much value a team creates with their plays. A negative number means you're actually making things worse, not better. Think about the weapons the Vikings have at their disposal. When they line up in 11 personnel, they're putting Justin Jefferson on the field. Justin Jefferson, one of the absolute best receivers in football. They've got Jordan Addison, a tremendously talented young receiver. They've got Jalen Naylor providing speed on the outside. They've got Aaron Jones, a dynamic running back who can catch passes out of the backfield and run between the tackles. And they've got TJ Hockenson, one of the premier tight ends in the National Football League. This grouping of talent should be absolutely unstoppable. This should be causing defensive coordinators to wake up in cold sweats. Instead, it's been worse than packages fielded by the struggling Tennessee Titans, the offensively challenged New Orleans Saints, the quarterback carousel New York Jets, and the hapless Cleveland Browns. But here's what makes this situation go from bad to genuinely concerning about the leadership of this football team. Kevin O'Connell knew these numbers. He had to know. Other NFL teams certainly knew. Defensive coordinators around the league were obviously studying these tendencies. When analysts and reporters can pull up this data and share it publicly on social media for everyone to see, you can bet your bottom dollar that every defensive coordinator the Vikings faced was well aware of these statistics. They knew that when Minnesota came out in 11 personnel, which was most of the time, they could attack with confidence because the Vikings' offense was essentially beating itself. So why would a Coach of the Year winner continue to run a scheme that demonstrably wasn't working? This is Kevin O'Connell we're talking about, the offensive mastermind who came from the Sean McVay coaching tree. This is the guy who was supposed to revolutionize the Vikings' offense with his innovative play calling and modern approach to the game. Yet here he was, stubbornly sticking to a formula that the entire league had figured out, refusing to make adjustments even as the evidence mounted that something was drastically wrong. This brings us to a genuinely uncomfortable question. Should the Vikings fire Kevin O'Connell? It's a bold question to ask about a coach who won Coach of the Year just last season, but the circumstances demand we at least consider it. If O'Connell refuses to adapt, if he continues to let his ego or stubbornness override common sense, then yes, the Vikings should absolutely consider moving on. The league has figured him out. His offensive identity, the scheme he's most comfortable running, has been exposed as fundamentally flawed for the current roster construction. And if he can't or won't change, it's only going to get worse from here. However, and this is a big however, what happened against the Commanders might just be the light at the end of the tunnel. For the first time all season, Kevin O'Connell showed genuine self-awareness and a willingness to change his approach. Against Washington, the Vikings ran 5 plays out of 13 personnel. Now, you might be thinking 5 plays doesn't sound like much, and you'd be right under normal circumstances. But here's the kicker. In all the games before that Commanders matchup, the Vikings had only run 13 personnel 10 times total for the entire season. They ran half that amount in a single game. That's not a minor adjustment. That's a fundamental shift in philosophy. Even more telling was the reduction in 11 personnel usage. Against the Commanders, the Vikings dropped down to using 11 personnel on just 49% of their plays, a massive 21 percentage point decrease from their season average. And wouldn't you know it, they had their best offensive performance of the entire year, shutting out a decent Washington team and putting up 31 points in the process. The correlation is impossible to ignore. What makes O'Connell's previous stubbornness even harder to understand is that his mentor, Sean McVay, the man whose coaching tree O'Connell grew from, runs 13 personnel more than anyone else in the NFL. McVay has been incredibly successful using multiple tight end sets. He's been at the forefront of this trend, and it's one of the reasons the Rams' offense has been so dynamic over the years. The most successful offenses this season have been the ones utilizing multiple tight ends most frequently. Teams that embrace heavier personnel groupings have been generating more explosive plays, having more success in the running game, and generally moving the ball more effectively than teams stuck in lighter formations. So the question becomes even more pointed. Why did Kevin O'Connell, who learned under Sean McVay, who saw firsthand how effective these heavier personnel groupings could be, refuse to implement them with the Vikings? Was it ego? Was it stubbornness? Did he want to prove he could succeed with his own distinct offensive identity rather than following in his mentor's footsteps? Whatever the reason, it cost the Vikings dearly for most of this season. And it's not like the Vikings lack the personnel to run these formations effectively. They signed Josh Oliver to a 3-year, $24 million contract in the offseason specifically because he's one of the best run-blocking tight ends in the league. They've got TJ Hawkinson, who's excellent both as a receiver and a blocker. They could easily run 12 personnel with 2 receivers and 2 tight ends, giving them multiple looks while still maintaining the ability to spread defenses out. The pieces were there all along. O'Connell just refused to use them properly. Let's talk about some of the historic lows this offense has hit under O'Connell's play calling this season. Against the Green Bay Packers, the Vikings had what can only be described as the worst second-half performance in franchise history. They followed that up by getting shut out for the first time since 2007 against the Seattle Seahawks. We're talking about a 6-quarter stretch that was historically, record-breakingly bad for an offense that has Justin Jefferson on it. That shouldn't even be possible, yet here we are. What's particularly telling about those disasters is who was on the other sideline. Jeff Hafley with the Packers and Mike McDonald with the Seahawks are both considered top-tier defensive minds. These are smart, innovative coordinators who study film obsessively and find ways to exploit offensive tendencies. They clearly identified what the Vikings were doing, recognized the patterns in O'Connell's play calling, and absolutely shut it down. That's not bad luck. That's not the players failing to execute. That's scheme being beaten by superior preparation and adjustment. The question moving forward is whether O'Connell has genuinely learned his lesson, or if the Commanders' game was just a one-week aberration. If he goes back to his old ways against the Dallas Cowboys and beyond. If he abandons the running game and the quick passing concepts that worked so well against Washington. If he goes back to forcing JJ McCarthy into difficult situations instead of making his young quarterback's life easier, then the hot seat should get scorching. These next 4 games are absolutely critical for Kevin O'Connell's future with this organization. Here's something else to consider. O'Connell has said in the past that he wanted to simplify the offense, to dumb it down, as he put it, which many interpreted as a backhanded comment about JJ McCarthy's abilities. But after seeing how successful McCarthy was in the Commanders' game with that simplified approach, with heavier personnel groupings that made his reads easier and gave him better protection, it raises the question of why O'Connell didn't implement this philosophy from the beginning. A coach's job is to adjust his scheme to fit his quarterback, not stubbornly stick to a system that doesn't suit the player running it. McCarthy is making just his 8th career start against the Cowboys. He's a rookie finding his way in the NFL. Meanwhile, O'Connell is in his 4th year as a head coach, a Coach of the Year award winner who's supposed to be one of the bright offensive minds in football. If anyone should be under pressure to prove themselves over these final 4 games, it should be O'Connell, not McCarthy. The veteran coach should be the one having to demonstrate he deserves to keep his job, not the rookie quarterback. To O'Connell's credit, he did make the change against Washington. He showed he's capable of self-reflection and adjustment, which is a crucial quality in any coach. The Commanders' game was a good building block, a foundation to potentially build something better over the season's final stretch. If the Vikings go 3-1 or 4-0 over their last 4 games, if the offense continues to look dynamic and functional, then O'Connell will have earned the benefit of the doubt moving forward. He'll have proven he can adapt when necessary. But if the Vikings revert to their old ways, if we see another Green Bay-style collapse or another Seattle-style shutout, if O'Connell goes back to running 11 personnel 70% of the time, despite knowing it's one of the worst packages in football, then serious questions need to be asked about his future with the organization. The Vikings cannot afford to head into next season with a coach on the hot seat, only to start 2-4 and be forced into a mid-season firing. That's organizational chaos that benefits nobody. Better to make the tough decision now if O'Connell proves unwilling or unable to sustain the changes he made against Washington. Think about the bigger picture here. The Vikings have invested heavily in their offensive talent. Jefferson is one of the highest-paid receivers in football. They paid Hawkinson. They paid Oliver. They invested a first-round pick in McCarthy. Aaron Jones was brought in specifically to add a dynamic element to the running game. This roster is built to win now, to compete for championships. But you can't win championships when your offensive scheme is ranked 333rd out of 334 in efficiency. You can't compete for Super Bowls when your coach is stubbornly running plays that don't work simply because he's uncomfortable changing his approach. The most successful coaches in NFL history have been the ones willing to adapt. Bill Belichick completely overhauled his offensive philosophy multiple times throughout his Patriots tenure based on the personnel he had available. Andy Reid has continuously evolved his offensive concepts in Kansas City. Even Sean McVay, O'Connell's mentor, has shown a willingness to adjust his approach based on what defenses are showing him. The great ones don't stick to a failing formula out of pride or stubbornness. They recognize what's working and what isn't, and they make the necessary changes. The encouraging sign is that O'Connell proved against Washington that he's capable of this kind of adaptation. He recognized that his preferred approach wasn't working. He made significant adjustments to the personnel groupings and play-calling philosophy, and the results were immediately apparent. The Vikings looked like a completely different offense, one that was physical, efficient, and capable of dominating an opponent from start to finish. If that version of Kevin O'Connell shows up for the remainder of the season, Vikings fans can breathe easy. But if the old Kevin O'Connell returns, if we see a regression to the mean, if 11 personnel starts creeping back up to 70% of snaps despite its proven ineffectiveness, then the organization has some serious soul-searching to do this offseason. They need to decide if O'Connell is the right leader for this team moving forward, or if his limitations as a play caller and strategist outweigh his strengths in other areas. The stakes couldn't be higher for these final 4 games. For JJ McCarthy, it's an opportunity to continue developing and proving he can be a franchise quarterback. For the Vikings as a team, it's a chance to build momentum heading into the playoffs and show they can compete with the league's best. But for Kevin O'Connell, it's about something even more fundamental. It's about proving he's the right coach for this job, that he's learned from his mistakes, and that he's willing to do whatever it takes to put his team in the best position to succeed, even if it means abandoning the offensive philosophy he's most comfortable with. The numbers don't lie. 333rd out of 334 is unacceptable for any NFL offense, let alone one with the talent level the Vikings possess. What happens over these next 4 games will determine whether Kevin O'Connell's adjustment against Washington was a genuine turning point or just a temporary deviation from a failing formula. Vikings fans, players, and management will all be watching closely to see which version of their head coach shows up. This is a story that's still being written, and the next chapter begins against Dallas. Will we see the innovative, adaptable Kevin O'Connell who showed up against Washington? Or will we see the stubborn, predictable version that nearly derailed the Vikings season? The answer to that question might just determine the future of this franchise. So if you found this deep dive into the Vikings coaching situation as fascinating as I did putting it together, make sure you smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you think Kevin O'Connell needs to do to keep his job. Do you think he's turned a corner, or are you worried he'll revert to his old ways? Should the Vikings be seriously considering a coaching change if things don't improve dramatically? Drop your hottest takes down below, because I want to hear what the Vikings faithful are thinking about all this. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another Vikings update, especially as we head into these crucial final games of the season. The drama is just getting started, and you won't want to miss a single development in this unfolding story. Let's go Vikings!